Elena led Jake to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city that had been converted into a secret meeting place for the resistance. The building looked abandoned from the outside, but inside, Jake found a sophisticated operation with communications, equipment, weapons storage, and detailed maps of Zenthari facilities. "How long have you been planning this?" Jake asked as he looked around the setup. "We started organizing 3 months after the programs began," Elena replied. "At first, it was just a few parents sharing information about what was happening to their children. But as more people became involved, we realized we needed to become more serious about resistance." Jake noticed that most of the equipment was improvised from civilian sources, but it showed impressive ingenuity. Someone had built communication jammers from spare electronics parts. Another person had modified hunting rifles to fire armor-piercing rounds. The resistance had been creative, but they lacked military expertise. "Elena, do you have contact information for other Royal Guard members who have returned to Earth?" "Some." "Why?" "Because if we're going to do this right, we need more than one trained soldier." Elena pulled out a secure tablet and showed Jake a list of names. "These are the Royal Guard members we know have returned in the last 2 months. Most of them have been asking questions about their families just like you did." Jake recognized several names from his unit. Rick Anderson had been a demolitions expert. Maya Brooks had specialized in alien technology systems. Steve Murphy was a tactical planning specialist. These were exactly the people he needed. "Can you arrange meetings with them?" "Already working on it. We sent coded messages to all of them yesterday after you contacted us. They should start arriving over the next few days." That evening, Jake met Rick Anderson at a small restaurant outside the city. Rick looked as angry and determined as Jake felt. "Jake, they got my boy Tommy," Rick said without preamble. "He's been in their programs for 4 months. When I got home, I barely recognized him. He used to be this loud, energetic kid who was always building things and asking questions. Now he just sits quietly and does whatever adults tell him." "Same thing happened to Katie. How much do you know about the programs?" "Enough to know that I want to burn their facilities to the ground." Rick's voice was cold. "I've been doing reconnaissance on the facility where Tommy was taken. I know their security schedules, their staff rotations, and their emergency procedures." Jake felt relief. Rick had been doing exactly what Jake would have done in his situation. "What did you find?" "Their security is designed to keep children, and not to keep attackers out. They have cameras and alarms, but their response protocols assume that any threat will come from panicked parents or isolated protesters. They're not prepared for a coordinated military assault." "What about weapons and defenses?" "The Zenthari guards carry standard energy weapons and wear light armor. Their communication systems are connected to a central hub that could be jammed or disabled. And here's the interesting part. They only have 4 guards per facility, plus human staff who are mostly just scared teachers and administrators." Jake was surprised. "Only 4 guards? They're protecting 50 children with 4 guards? They don't think they need more. In their minds, humans are too weak and afraid to pose a real threat." The next day, Maya Brooks arrived at the warehouse. She had been investigating the technology systems at the Zenthari facilities and had made some important discoveries. "Jake, I think I know how to shut down their entire communication network," she said, spreading technical diagrams across a table. "All their facilities are connected to a central command system that coordinates the programs across the planet. If we can hack into that system, we can disrupt their operations globally. How would we do that?" Maya pointed to a diagram of the main Zenthari building downtown. "The central hub is located in their administrative complex. It's more heavily guarded than the individual facilities, but if we could get inside for just 15 minutes, I could plant a virus that would spread through their entire network." Jake studied the building plans. "What kind of virus?" "Something I developed based on Zenthari programming languages I learned during Royal Guard training. It would corrupt their data files, disable their security systems, and broadcast their internal communications to human resistance groups worldwide." "You mean we could expose what they're doing to other planets?" "Exactly. The Zenthari have been telling the Galactic Council that their programs on Earth are educational and voluntary. If we could broadcast evidence of the abuse, it might turn other species against them." Steve Murphy arrived 2 days later with tactical plans for coordinated attacks. He had been analyzing the locations and schedules of all Xanthari facilities in North America. "Jake, if we're going to do this, we need to hit multiple targets simultaneously," Steve explained. "If we only attack one facility, they'll increase security at all the others and make future operations impossible." "How many targets are you thinking?" "At least 6 facilities across 3 cities, all attacked within the same hour. It would prevent them from coordinating a response and send a message that the resistance is larger and more organized than they think." Jake looked around the warehouse at the growing group of resistance members. In addition to the returning Royal Guard soldiers, Elena had recruited dozens of other people. Parents whose children had been abused, teachers who had witnessed the programs, scientists who wanted to help develop better weapons and tactics. "Steve, do we have enough people for 6 simultaneous attacks?" "If we recruit more Royal Guard members, yes." Elena's contacts have identified at least 12 other soldiers who have returned to Earth in the last month. Most of them are dealing with the same family situations we are. Elena stood up and addressed the group. "I've been in contact with resistance cells in other cities. Chicago, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Houston all have groups similar to ours. If we can coordinate with them, we could launch attacks across the entire continent." Jake felt the plan growing larger and more ambitious. What had started as a desire to rescue his daughter was becoming a nationwide uprising. "Elena, what kind of numbers are we talking about?" "Maybe 500 active resistance members across all cities, plus several thousand supporters who could provide safe houses, transportation, and supplies." Maya looked up from her technical equipment. "Jake, I've been monitoring Xanthari communications. They're not expecting any organized resistance. Their security protocols are designed for individual troublemakers, not coordinated military operations." Rick laughed grimly. "They're about to get a very unpleasant surprise." Jake walked to a map of North America that covered one wall of the warehouse. Red pins marked the locations of known Xanthari facilities. There were dozens of them, spread across major population centers. "All right, here's what we're going to do," Jake announced to the group. "We're going to hit every single facility on this map. We're going to rescue every child in their programs. We're going to capture evidence of what they've been doing. And we're going to show the galaxy that humans are not the weak, controllable species the Xanthari think we are." The room was quiet for a moment as people absorbed the scope of what Jake was proposing. Finally, Elena spoke. "Jake, that's not a rescue operation. That's a revolution." Jake looked around at the faces of parents, teachers, soldiers, and scientists who had all been pushed too far by alien oppression. The day of the coordinated attacks arrived exactly 1 week later. Jake stood in the warehouse at 4 a.m, watching his team make final preparations. 22 resistance members would assault the facility where Katie had been abused, while similar teams prepared to hit targets in 5 other cities. Maya finished calibrating the communication jammers that would prevent the Xanthari from coordinating their response. Rick checked the explosive charges that would disable the facility's power systems. Elena reviewed the medical supplies they would need to treat rescued children, and Steve coordinated timing with resistance cells across the continent. "All teams, report ready," Steve announced, listening to encrypted radio chatter. "Chicago is in position, Los Angeles is ready. Atlanta and Houston are standing by. We are go for operation in 30 minutes. Jake felt the familiar calm that came before combat. He had experienced this feeling during dangerous Royal Guard missions, but this time was different. This time he was fighting for his own daughter and his own people. "Remember the rules of engagement," Jake addressed his team. "Xanthari guards are legitimate military targets. Human staff should be captured, not killed unless they actively resist. Children are the priority. Everything else is secondary." The team loaded into 3 vehicles and drove through the empty streets toward downtown. The Xanthari facility looked peaceful in the early morning darkness, with only a few lights visible in the windows. Jake knew that inside, night shift guards were probably reading reports or playing alien games, never expecting that their peaceful assignment was about to become a battlefield. Jake's team took positions around the building while Maya approached the communication array on the roof. At exactly 5:30 a.m., she activated the jamming devices. The facility's communications went dead, cutting it off from the central command network. Rick's explosives disabled the main power grid 60 seconds later. Emergency lighting came on inside the building, but the security cameras and automated defenses were offline. Jake led the main assault team through the front entrance. The human security guard at the desk was so surprised that he surrendered without reaching for his weapon. Jake's team zip-tied him and moved deeper into the building. The first Zenthari guard appeared in a hallway leading to the administrative section. The alien was tall and reptilian, wearing the light armor that Jake recognized from his Royal Guard service. The guard raised his energy weapon, but Jake was faster. A burst from Jake's modified rifle punched through the alien's armor and dropped him instantly. "Contact front," Jake called over his radio. "One guard down, proceeding to objective." The sound of weapons fire echoed through the building as other team members engaged additional guards. Jake heard Rick's voice over the radio. "East wing secure, no casualties on our side." Jake reached the children's dormitory area and found 32 human children locked in small rooms. Most of them cowered when they saw armed humans, but Katie recognized her father's voice. "Dad, is it really you?" "It's me, sweetheart. We're here to take you home." Jake's team began evacuating children while Elena provided medical attention to those with serious injuries. Several children had fresh bruises and cuts from recent abuse sessions. One boy could barely walk due to injuries to his legs. Maya's voice crackled over the radio from her position monitoring Zenthari communications. "Jake, I'm picking up emergency broadcasts from other facilities. They're reporting coordinated attacks across multiple cities. The operation is working." Jake felt a surge of satisfaction. The nationwide coordination was proceeding exactly as planned. The team reached the facility's computer center, where Maya began downloading files that documented the abuse programs. The data would provide evidence of Zenthari crimes that could be broadcast to the galaxy. "Got it," Maya announced. 6 months of detailed records, including video documentation of abuse sessions and communication with Zenthari Command Authority. As the team prepared to evacuate, Jake heard Maya's warning over the radio. "Multiple vehicles approaching from the north. Looks like Zenthari reinforcements." Jake looked out a window and saw 4 military vehicles racing toward the building. The aliens had managed to send help despite the communication jamming. "All teams, prepare for contact with reinforcements," Jake ordered. "Rick, can you delay them?" "Affirmative. I have charges set on the approach road." The explosions from Rick's charges disabled 2 of the approaching vehicles and forced the others to stop and deploy on foot. Jake counted at least 12 Zenthari soldiers moving toward the building in tactical formation. "Elena, get the children to the evacuation vehicles. Maya, how much more time do you need?" 2 more minutes to finish the upload to resistance networks." Jake positioned his team to defend the building while the evacuation continued. The Zenthari soldiers were well trained and equipped, but they were facing humans who knew their tactics and weaknesses. The first exchange of fire came when Zenthari troops tried to enter through the main lobby. Jake's team had excellent defensive positions and superior knowledge of the building layout. 3 aliens fell in the first 30 seconds of combat. But more Zenthari vehicles were arriving. Jake realized that despite the success of the mission, his team was in danger of being surrounded and overwhelmed. "Steve, what's the status on other cities?" "Chicago reports complete success, 38 children rescued. Los Angeles has secured their primary target and is moving on a secondary facility. Atlanta encountered heavy resistance but completed their mission. Houston is still in progress." The coordinated attacks were succeeding beyond Jake's best expectations. Hundreds of children were being rescued simultaneously across the continent. Maya finished her data upload and joined the evacuation. "Jake, the evidence is now in the hands of resistance cells worldwide. They're already beginning to broadcast it to galactic news networks." Jake was the last person to leave the building. As his team drove away with the rescued children, he looked back to see the Zenthari facility burning. It would never again be used to abuse human children. Over the radio, reports continued to arrive from other cities. The resistance had hit 18 facilities successfully, rescued over 400 children, and captured massive amounts of evidence documenting the abuse programs. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. The Zenthari would respond with increased security, and potentially with military force. The resistance had won the first battle, but the war was just starting. As they reached the safe house where rescued children would receive medical care and counseling, Katie approached her father. "Dad, is it over? Are the programs finished?" Jake knelt down and hugged his daughter. "The programs at these facilities are finished, but sweetheart, we still have a lot of work to do to make sure this never happens again." Katie nodded seriously. "I want to help. I want to make sure no other kids have to go through what we did." Jake looked at his daughter and saw the determination in her eyes. The Zenthari had tried to break human children and turn them into fearful servants. Instead, they had created a generation of young humans who understood oppression and were motivated to fight against it. "Katie, I think you and the other kids are going to be very important in what comes next." Maya approached with a tablet showing galactic news reports. "Jake, you need to see this. You need to see. The evidence we broadcast is causing a massive scandal in the Galactic Council. Several species are demanding investigations into Zenthari activities on Earth." Jake smiled as he read the reports. The Resistance had accomplished more than just rescuing children. They had exposed the Zenthari to galactic scrutiny and turned humans from victims into fighters. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of when they fought to protect their families. Jake knew he could not fight the Zenthari alone. He needed allies, weapons, and most importantly, he needed information about other resistance efforts. Carol had mentioned that some people were quietly organizing, but finding them without alerting government surveillance would be difficult. The answer came from an unexpected source. Katie had been listening to her parents' whispered conversations and approached Jake while he was working in the garage. "Dad, I know someone who might help you." Jake looked up from the alien technology manuals he had been studying. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Dr. Vasquez. She was one of the teachers at the Zenthari facility, but she was different from the others. She tried to help us when the guards weren't watching." Jake set down his tools. "Tell me about her." Katie sat on a workbench, swinging her legs nervously. Most of the human staff at the facility just did what the Zenthari told them. They were afraid to make the aliens angry, but Dr. Vasquez used to sneak us extra food and medical supplies when we were hurt. She told us that what was happening wasn't our fault. Did she ever say anything about fighting back? Once when I was really scared after a bad session, she whispered to me that some humans were working to stop the programs. She said that help was coming, but we had to be patient and stay strong. Jake felt the first spark of hope he had experienced since returning to Earth. "Do you know where I can find her?" She gave me a way to contact her if things got really bad. Katie pulled a small piece of paper from her pocket. She said to leave a message at this number, and she would find a way to meet safely. Jake looked at the number. It was not a standard phone number, but rather a series of digits that looked like a coded communication system. Dr. Vasquez had been careful about maintaining secure contact methods. That evening, Jake used an encrypted communication system he had learned during Royal Guard training. He left a message identifying himself as Katie's father and requesting a meeting. Within hours, he received a response with instructions to visit a specific coffee shop the next morning and order a drink with an unusual combination of ingredients. The coffee shop was in a busy part of downtown, perfect for a meeting that needed to look casual. Jake ordered the drink as instructed and sat at a corner table. After 15 minutes, a woman in her 40s approached his table. "You must be Katie's father. I'm Elena Vasquez." Jake stood and shook her hand. Dr. Vasquez was smaller than he had expected, but her grip was firm and her eyes were alert and intelligent. "Katie told me you tried to help the children at the facility. I did what I could without getting myself removed from the program. If I had been discovered, they would have replaced me with someone who cared less about the children's welfare." Dr. Vasquez sat down across from Jake. "I've been hoping someone like you would return from the Royal Guard program. Someone like me? A trained soldier with personal motivation to fight back. Most humans are too afraid to resist, and the few who aren't afraid lack the skills to be effective." Jake leaned forward. "Katie said you knew about resistance efforts. Is that true?" Dr. Vasquez looked around the coffee shop carefully. "There are people working to oppose the programs, But we've been limited in what we can accomplish. We've rescued a few children and hidden them with families outside the cities. We've gathered evidence of the abuse, though we have no way to publicize it. And we've been studying Zenthari technology and tactics. How many people are involved? Maybe 200 across the entire continent. Scientists, former military personnel, teachers, doctors, and parents who refused to accept the official explanations. Dr. Vasquez sipped her coffee. But we've been waiting for someone with your training and experience. What do you know about my training? More than you might expect. I used to work for the Military Research Division before the Zenthari program started. I know that Royal Guard members received advanced tactical training, alien technology familiarization, and psychological preparation for dealing with hostile species. Jake was impressed. Dr. Vasquez had done her homework. What kind of resistance are you planning? Until now, we've been focused on documentation and small-scale rescues. But with your knowledge of Zenthari weaknesses and combat techniques, we could plan more ambitious operations. Such as? Dr. Vasquez pulled out a tablet and showed Jake a map of the city. There are 3 Zenthari facilities in the metropolitan area. Each one processes about 50 children per day. If we could shut down even one facility permanently, it would send a message that humans are not as helpless as the Zenthari believe. Jake studied the map. What kind of security do these facilities have? Zenthari guards, human security staff, and surveillance systems. But the aliens are overconfident. They don't expect organized resistance from what they consider an inferior species. That's their first mistake. Jake traced the routes around the facilities on the map. What about weapons and equipment? That's been our biggest limitation. We have some small arms and basic explosives, but nothing that could penetrate Zenthari armor or disable their technology. Jake smiled for the first time since returning to Earth. I can help with that. Royal Guard training included detailed information about Zenthari equipment vulnerabilities. I know how to disable their shields, jam their communications, and neutralize their weapons. Dr. Vasquez's eyes widened. You mean we could actually attack them directly? We could do more than attack them. We could beat them. Jake's voice became intense. The Zenthari have never faced humans who were trained specifically to fight them. They've only dealt with civilians and government officials who were too afraid to resist. What would you need? Jake thought about the weapons and technology he had access to through his Royal Guard equipment. I'd need about 20 people with basic combat training, some specific electronic components to build jamming devices, and a detailed layout of one of the facilities. I can provide all of that. Then we can hit them within a week. Dr. Vasquez stared at Jake. You're serious? You actually think we can win a fight against the Zenthari? Dr. Vasquez, I spent 18 months learning everything there is to know about Zenthari military capabilities. I know their strengths, but more importantly, I know their weaknesses. And the biggest weakness is that they've never faced an enemy that understood them as well as I do. What about government retaliation? What about the threat of Earth being expelled from the Galactic Council? Jake thought about his conversation with Colonel Rodriguez. The government made their choice when they decided to sacrifice our children for political advantages. Now it's time for the people to make a different choice. And if we fail, then at least our children will know that someone tried to save them. But Dr. Vasquez, I don't think we're going to fail. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for several minutes considering Jake's proposal. Finally, she nodded. All right, let's do it, but I have one condition. What's that? The first facility we hit has to be the one where Katie was abused. Those children have suffered the longest, and they deserve to be freed first. Jake felt a surge of gratitude toward this woman who had risked her safety to help his daughter and other children. Dr. Vasquez, I think we're going to work very well together. Call me Elena. And Jake? Yes? Your daughter is one of the bravest kids I've ever met. She never gave up hope that someone would come to help them. She's going to be proud of what you're planning. Jake looked out the window toward the downtown area where the Zenthari facilities operated. Soon, those buildings would become battlegrounds. Soon, the aliens who thought humans were weak and controllable would learn what happened when humans fought for their children. Elena, when do we start? How about right now? Jake sat in his car outside the military communications center, staring at his phone. He needed to contact his commanding officer, Colonel Sam Rodriguez, but something held him back. After learning about the Zenthari programs and the government's cooperation, Jake was not sure who he could trust. Finally, he made the call. Colonel Rodriguez answered on the second ring. Jake Morrison. Good to hear from you, son. How's the family? The casual tone felt wrong. Rodriguez had always been direct and serious. This friendly chatter seemed forced. That's what I'm calling about, sir. I need to ask you some questions about what's been happening on Earth while we were deployed. There was a pause. What kind of questions? Questions about alien facilities operating on Earth. Questions about programs involving human children. Questions about why nobody told the Royal Guard what was happening to our families while we were gone. Another longer pause. Jake, I think we should meet in person. Are you still in New Chicago? Yes, sir. Meet me at the old warehouse district, building 47, in 2 hours. Come alone. The call ended abruptly. Jake sat in his car, feeling more suspicious than before. Why meet at an abandoned warehouse instead of the military base? Why the emphasis on coming alone? Jake arrived at the warehouse early and scouted the area. Building 47 was isolated and surrounded by empty lots. Perfect for a private conversation, or perfect for an ambush. Jake positioned himself where he could see all approaches and waited. Colonel Rodriguez arrived exactly on time, driving a civilian car instead of a military vehicle. He looked older than Jake remembered, with new lines of stress around his eyes. Rodriguez entered the building and Jake followed after waiting a few minutes to make sure no one else was coming. Jake, good to see you. Rodriguez extended his hand, but his smile looked tired. Colonel, thanks for meeting me. I have some serious concerns about what I've found on Earth. Rodriguez nodded and gestured for Jake to sit on an old shipping crate. I know why you called. Your daughter was in one of the Zenthari programs. Jake felt a chill. How did you know that? Because I know about all of it, Jake. The programs, the facilities, the agreements. I know because I helped plan them. Jake stood up quickly, his hand moving instinctively toward where his weapon would be if he were armed. You what? Sit down, Jake, let me explain. Rodriguez looked exhausted. 18 months ago, the Zenthari approached Earth's government with an ultimatum. They offered us continued membership in the Galactic Council, trade agreements, and protection from hostile species. In exchange, they wanted access to human children for what they called cultural development programs. You mean abuse programs? I mean exactly what you think I mean. Rodriguez's voice was flat. The alternative was expulsion from the Galactic Council, economic isolation, and eventual conquest by species that view humans as nothing more than animals. Jake felt his world shifting again. So you chose to sacrifice our children to avoid a war we might lose. We chose to sacrifice some children to save the entire human species from extinction. Rodriguez met Jake's eyes. Do you think that was wrong? I think it was cowardice. Rodriguez laughed bitterly. Cowardice? Jake, do you have any idea how outgunned humanity is? The Zenthari alone have a fleet that could turn Earth into a burned rock in less than a week. Add their allies and we wouldn't last a day in open warfare. Then why train the Royal Guard at all? Why make us into elite soldiers if you were planning to surrender anyway? Because the Royal Guard program was part of the deal. Rodriguez stood up and began pacing. The Zenthari wanted Earth's best warriors removed from the planet while they established their programs. They were afraid that soldiers like you might cause problems if you were here when the program started. Jake felt sick. You sent us away deliberately. You knew what they were going to do to our children and you made sure we wouldn't be here to stop it. We made sure the most dangerous humans were off-planet and occupied with missions they thought were important. Yes. Rodriguez stopped pacing and faced Jake. And it worked. The programs were established without resistance. Earth maintained its galactic relationships. Humanity survived. Humanity survived? Colonel, have you seen what they're doing to the children? Have you seen the bruises, the fear, the psychological damage? I've seen the reports. Reports? That's my daughter we're talking about. That's your people's children being systematically Abused by aliens who think we're animals. Rodriguez's voice became harder. Those children are acceptable losses to prevent the extinction of our entire species. Some sacrifice was necessary. Jake stared at his former commanding officer. You really believe that? I believe in the survival of humanity above all else. Individual suffering is tragic, but species extinction is final. What about the other Royal Guard members who are returning? What happens when they find out what's been done to their families? They'll be debriefed and given new assignments off-world, extended deployments to prevent them from causing problems on Earth. Jake understood now. And if they refuse those assignments? Then they'll be classified as security threats and dealt with accordingly. The threat was clear. Jake and the other returning Royal Guard members had two choices: accept deployment away from their families or be eliminated as threats to Earth's arrangement with the Zenthari. Colonel, what happened to you? When I left for Royal Guard training, you were the kind of officer who would die before abandoning his soldiers' families. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. When I left for the negotiations with the Zenthari, I thought I was going to discuss trade agreements and cultural exchanges. When I realized what they actually wanted, I tried to refuse. Do you know what they showed me, Jake? What? Video of human colonies being destroyed by Zenthari allies. Entire planets turned to glass. Billions of people dead in minutes. Rodriguez's voice became very quiet. They told me that Earth could join those dead worlds or Earth could accept their guidance and survive. They gave me 6 hours to decide. So you chose survival. I chose to save most of humanity by sacrificing some of humanity. And I'll live with that choice for the rest of my life. Jake looked at Rodriguez and saw a broken man who had convinced himself that betrayal was pragmatism. Colonel, what if I told you there was a third option? What if there was a way to fight back without dooming Earth to destruction? I'd say you're dreaming. Humans don't have the technology or numbers to fight the Zenthari. Humans have something better. We have soldiers trained by the Zenthari themselves. We know their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses, and we have something they don't understand. What's that? We're not fighting for trade agreements or political advantage. We're fighting for our children. Jake stood up. Colonel, I'm going to stop the programs. I'm going to free those children, and I'm going to make the Zenthari pay for what they've done. Rodriguez shook his head. Jake, if you interfere with the programs, you'll destroy Earth's relationship with the Galactic Council. You'll doom humanity. No, sir. I'll save humanity's soul. And maybe that's more important than saving humanity's body. Jake walked toward the warehouse exit. Behind him, Rodriguez called out, Jake, if you go down this path, I can't protect you. The government will classify you as a terrorist. Jake turned back. Colonel, 18 months ago, you sent me to protect alien dignitaries because you said it would make humanity proud to serve the galaxy. Now you're telling me to let aliens abuse our children because it will keep humanity safe. That's right. Then maybe it's time for someone else to decide what humanity stands for. Jake left the warehouse knowing that he was now considered an enemy of his own government. But as he drove home to Katie, he felt more certain than ever that he was making the right choice. Some things were worth fighting for, even if the fight seemed impossible to win. Jake spent the next 3 days carefully gathering information. He could not just storm into the Zenthari facility and demand answers. That would put Katie and other children at risk. Instead, he used his Royal Guard training to investigate quietly and systematically. He started by walking around the neighborhood talking to other parents. At first, people were reluctant to speak with him. But when he mentioned that Katie had been in the Zenthari programs, their attitudes changed. They realized he was not a government spy or alien sympathizer. He was another worried parent. Mrs. Chen from down the street was the first to open up. Her 10-year-old son Danny had been selected for the program 6 months ago. She invited Jake into her kitchen and spoke in whispers while constantly checking the windows. They came to our door with official papers, she explained. Government, representatives and 2 Zenthari officials. They said Danny had been chosen for a special honor. Cultural immersion education, they called it. They said refusing would mark our family as anti-alien extremists. Jake listened carefully. What happened to Danny in the programs? Mrs. Chen's hand shook as she poured coffee. He started having nightmares. He would wake up screaming. During the day, he became quiet and obedient in a way that wasn't natural. Before the programs, Danny was always asking questions and getting into minor trouble. After they started, he just did whatever adults told him without question. Did he have physical injuries? Bruises, mostly, sometimes cuts. The Zenthari said it was from clumsiness during physical training exercises. They said human children needed to learn better coordination. Mrs. Chen started crying. But I know what abuse looks like. My father was military. Those weren't training injuries. Jake asked about other families. Mrs. Chen gave him names and addresses. Every family had the same story. Children selected for honor programs, government pressure to participate, gradual changes in the children's behavior, and physical signs of abuse that parents were told to ignore. The pattern became clear as Jake talked to more people. The Zenthari had established what they called cultural education centers in major cities across Earth. They selected children between ages 8 and 15, always describing it as an educational opportunity. Parents who objected faced visits from government officials who suggested their resistance could affect their jobs, housing, or other government services. Jake visited the Zenthari facility downtown. From the outside, it looked like a normal office building, with alien architectural touches. A sign by the front entrance read, Zenthari Cultural Education Center, Building Tomorrow's Galactic Citizens. The building was surrounded by a high fence with security cameras and guards. He watched the facility for several hours from a nearby coffee shop. He saw buses arriving with groups of children. The children walked in orderly lines, heads down, no talking or laughing. These were not children going to an exciting educational program. These were children who had been trained to be afraid. Jake recognized some of the Zenthari officials entering and leaving the building. He had protected officials from the same species during his Royal Guard service. They moved with the arrogant confidence of beings who considered themselves superior to everyone around them. That evening, Jake called his wife's sister Carol, who worked for the city government. Carol had always been good at finding information through official channels. When Jake explained what he needed, Carol was quiet for a long moment. Jake, I can't talk about this over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow at the park near my office? Come alone and don't tell anyone where you're going. The next day, Jake met Carol at a picnic table in a small park. She looked around carefully before speaking. The Zenthari arrived 8 months ago, she said quietly. They came with full diplomatic credentials and support from the Galactic Council. They said they wanted to establish cultural exchange programs to help human children understand their place in galactic society. What do you mean, their place? Carol pulled out a folder of official documents. According to these papers, humans are classified as a developing species under Zenthari guidance. The programs are designed to teach human children proper respect for superior species and appropriate behavior in mixed species environments. Jake read through the documents. The language was formal and diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. The Zenthari viewed humans as an inferior species that needed to be trained and controlled. The children's programs were not education. They were systematic conditioning designed to create a generation of humans who would accept alien authority without question. Carol, this is slavery with fancy words. They're using children as practice targets for abuse and calling it cultural education. I know that. You know that. But the Earth government signed agreements allowing this. They were told that resistance would mean Earth's expulsion from the Galactic Council. No more trade agreements, no more technology sharing, no more protection from hostile alien species. Jake felt sick. So our government sold our children to maintain trade relationships? It's worse than that. Carol looked around again and lowered her voice even more. The Zenthari made it clear that the Royal Guard program was part of the deal. They wanted Earth's best warriors off-planet while they established their programs. Here, you and the other Royal Guards were deliberately kept away while this was happening. The pieces fell into place in Jake's mind. The Royal Guard program had not been an honor. It had been a trick. While Earth's most capable fighters were scattered across the galaxy protecting alien dignitaries, Those same aliens were setting up control systems on Earth itself. How many children are involved? Thousands. Every major city has multiple facilities. They're expanding the programs every month. Carol handed him another document. This is the real nightmare, Jake. Next year, they plan to make the programs mandatory for all human children, no exceptions. Jake stared at the document. It outlined plans for mandatory cultural education starting at age 6. All human children would spend half their time in Zenthari facilities, learning what the documents called proper species hierarchy awareness and submission protocols for inferior beings. They're planning to break an entire generation. Jake said, turn human children into servants who think abuse is normal, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The Earth military has been ordered to protect the Zenthari facilities. Local police have been told the programs are classified government operations. Anyone who protests too loudly gets investigated for sedition. Jake thought about Katie, sitting in her room trying to be invisible. He thought about Danny Chen waking up screaming from nightmares. He thought about thousands of other children learning to accept abuse as normal treatment from their supposed superiors. Carol, what do you know about other Royal Guard members returning to Earth? A few have come back in the last month. I heard some of them have been asking questions like you have, but they've been quiet about it. Jake made a decision. The Earth government might be too afraid to protect its children, but Jake was not a government official. He was a father and a trained warrior, and he was starting to understand that the Royal Guard training he had received could be used for more than protecting alien dignitaries. Carol, I need you to find contact information for other returning Royal Guard members. Can you do that? Probably, but why? Jake stood up and gathered the documents. Because the Zenthari made one very big mistake when they designed this plan. What mistake? They trained us to be the galaxy's best soldiers. They taught us alien technology, tactics, and weaknesses. They wanted us out of the way while they set up their control systems. Jake's voice was cold and determined. But now we're back, and we're very angry parents. Jake opened the front door and called out softly, Lisa, Katie, I'm home. He heard quick footsteps and the sound of something being moved around. Lisa appeared in the hallway, but she did not run to hug him like she used to. Instead, she stood at a distance and smiled nervously. Jake, you're early. We weren't expecting you until tonight. Something was wrong with her smile. It looked forced, like she was trying too hard to seem happy. Jake set down his gear bag and stepped toward her. The transport left ahead of schedule. Where's Katie? I can't wait to see how much she's grown. Lisa's eyes darted toward the stairs. She's in her room. She's been feeling sick lately. Maybe you should wait a bit before seeing her. Jake frowned. In all the years he had known Lisa, she had never tried to keep him away from Katie. Their daughter always ran to greet him when he came home from any trip, even short ones. Sick? What's wrong with her? Should I call a doctor? No doctors. She just needs rest. Why don't you sit down and I'll make you some coffee? You must be tired from the trip. Lisa was acting like a stranger. She kept her distance and would not look directly at him. Her hands shook slightly as she moved around the kitchen. Jake had seen this kind of behavior before during his military service. It was how people acted when they were afraid. Lisa, what's going on? You're scaring me. Is Katie really sick or is something else wrong? Before Lisa could answer, they heard a loud thump from upstairs followed by a cry of pain. Jake was moving toward the stairs before Lisa could stop him. Wait, Jake, please let me go check on her first. But Jake was already taking the stairs 2 at a time. The sound had come from Katie's room. He pushed open the door and saw his daughter, sitting on the floor next to her bed, holding her arm and trying not to cry. Katie, what happened? Are you hurt? Katie looked up and Jake's heart nearly stopped. His daughter looked thin and pale. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she had not been sleeping well. But what shocked him most was the way she flinched when she saw him, like she was afraid he might hurt her. Dad, you're home? Her voice was small and uncertain. Jake knelt, down beside her. Of course I'm home. I missed you so much. What happened to your arm? Katie pulled her sleeve down quickly to cover her arm, but not before Jake saw something that made his blood run cold. There were dark marks on her skin that looked like finger bruises. Someone had grabbed his daughter hard enough to leave marks. I just bumped into the bed. I'm clumsy now. Katie would not meet his eyes. Jake gently took her hand. Can I see where you're hurt? I might be able to help. Katie pulled her hand away and stood up quickly. When she moved, Jake noticed she was careful about how she positioned her body, like someone who was used to being in pain. Her long-sleeved shirt and pants covered most of her skin, but Jake could see more bruises on her neck and ankles. Katie, who did this to you? Jake's voice was quiet but intense. Nobody did anything. I told you, I'm just clumsy. Katie backed toward the wall. Lisa appeared in the doorway. Jake, please leave her alone. She's been through enough. Enough of what? Jake stood up and faced his wife. Lisa, I can see bruises on our daughter. Someone has been hurting her. I need to know who, and I need to know now. Lisa's face crumpled and she started to cry. You don't understand. We can't talk about it. They said if we told anyone, especially if we told you, they would make things worse. Who said that? Who are you afraid of? Lisa looked around the room like she was checking for listening devices. Then she whispered, the Zenthari. They've been here for months. They have programs for children, cultural exchange programs, they call them. Katie was selected. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. The Zenthari were one of the alien species he had protected during his Royal Guard service. They were known for being arrogant and viewing other species as inferior, but they were supposed to be civilized members of the Galactic Council. What kind of cultural exchange? What did they do to her? They took her 3 times a week to their facility downtown. They said it was educational. They said human children needed to learn proper respect for superior species. Lisa's voice broke. But Katie came home with bruises. She stopped eating. She stopped talking about school or friends. She just stays in her room and tries to be invisible. Jake looked at his daughter, who was now sitting on her bed with her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked so small and afraid. This was not the confident, happy child he had left 18 months ago. Katie, can you tell me what happened at these programs? Katie shook her head quickly. I'm not supposed to talk about it. They said talking about it would be disrespectful. They said if I was disrespectful, they would have to teach me better manners. The way she said teach me better manners made Jake's hands clench into fists. He had heard enough euphemisms during his military career to know what that meant. Someone had been systematically abusing his daughter and using fancy words to justify it. How many other children were in these programs? Lots, Katie whispered. Kids from all over the city. But we weren't supposed to talk to each other either. Jake felt rage building inside him like a growing fire. The Zenthari had been using human children as victims, while their parents were afraid to speak up. And they had done it while Jake was off protecting other Zenthari officials across the galaxy. Lisa, why didn't Earth's government stop this? Why didn't anyone protect the children? Lisa laughed bitterly. The government? Jake, the government helped set up the programs. They said it was an honor that the Zenthari wanted to educate our children. They said parents who objected were being xenophobic and risking Earth's relationship with the Galactic Council. Jake sat down heavily in Katie's desk chair. Everything he had believed about his service, about Earth's place in the galaxy, about protecting alien dignity, was crashing down around him. While he had been proudly serving as a Royal Guard, his own daughter had been suffering at the hands of the very species he was protecting. Dad? Katie's voice was very small. Are you angry at me? Jake looked at his daughter and felt his heart break. She thought he might be angry at her for being a victim. She had been so thoroughly terrorized that she blamed herself. Katie, listen to me carefully. I am not angry at you. I am not disappointed in you. None of this is your fault. You did nothing wrong. Jake spoke slowly and clearly. I am angry at the people who hurt you, and I promise you, they will never hurt you again. Katie started to cry. But Dad, they're too powerful. Everyone is afraid of them. Even the police are afraid. Jake knelt down beside his daughter's bed. Katie, Your father is not like everyone else. I've spent 18 months learning everything about aliens, including the Xanthari. I know their weaknesses, and I know something they probably forgot. What's that? Jake's voice was cold and determined. They forgot that humans protect their families. And when someone hurts our family, we don't stay afraid for very long. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and felt something was wrong. The metal floor of Earth Station Prime hummed under his boots, but the usual sounds of a busy space station were missing. No crowds of people rushing to greet returning soldiers. No news reporters asking questions about the Royal Guard missions. Just empty corridors and the soft hum of air recyclers. He carried his gear bag over one shoulder and walked toward the main hub. 18 months of protecting alien dignitaries across 3 star systems had changed him. His uniform was clean and pressed, decorated with commendations from grateful alien governments. The Galactic Council had praised the human Royal Guard unit for their skill and honor. Jake felt proud of his service, but now he just wanted to go home to his wife Lisa and daughter Katie. The customs checkpoint was almost empty. The officer, scanning Jake's papers, barely looked up. No welcome home speech. No thank you for your service. Jake found this strange but said nothing. Maybe Earth had grown tired of the Royal Guard program. Maybe people had other things to worry about. Jake tried to contact his old friend Pete Collins, who worked station security. Pete had always been good for the latest news and gossip. But when Jake found him near the cargo bay, Pete acted nervous and would not meet his eyes. "Hey, Pete. Good to see you," Jake said with a smile. Pete jumped like someone had shocked him. "Oh, Jake, you're back." "Yeah, just got in. Things seem quiet around here. What's the news from Earth?" Pete looked around like he was checking for listeners. His hands shook slightly. "Everything's fine, same as always. You should probably get home to your family." This was not the Pete that Jake remembered. Pete used to talk for hours about station, politics, and Earth news. Now he seemed scared to say anything at all. "Pete, is everything okay? You seem worried about something." "No, no worries. Just busy with work. You know how it is." Pete backed away. "Really? You should go home. Your family is probably waiting." Jake watched Pete hurry away and felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Something was definitely wrong. He decided to try contacting other people he knew on the station. The communications officer in the Royal Guard liaison office was new. Jake did not recognize her. When he asked about messages from his family, she said there were none. When he asked about news from Earth, she gave him standard reports about trade and weather. Nothing useful. Jake tried calling his wife Lisa from the public communications terminal. The call went through, but Lisa sounded strange. Her voice was tight and careful. "Jake, is that really you?" "Of course it's me. I just got back to Earth Station. I'll be home tomorrow. How are you and Katie?" There was a long pause. "We're fine. Everything is fine. When will you be home exactly?" "I'll catch the next transport to New Chicago. Should be there by evening. Is Katie excited to see me?" Another pause. "Yes, she's excited. We'll see you tomorrow." The call ended abruptly. Lisa had not sounded excited. She had sounded afraid. Jake walked to the transport bay feeling more worried with each step. The few station workers he passed avoided looking at him. When he tried to start conversations, they gave short answers and walked away quickly. It was like everyone was afraid to talk to him. The transport to Earth was nearly empty. Jake sat alone and watched the stars through the small window. 18 months ago, when he left for Royal Guard duty, Earth had been proud of its soldiers serving the Galactic Council. Humans were finally respected members of the galactic community. The Royal Guard program was seen as proof that humans could be trusted with important responsibilities. But now something had changed. The fear in people's eyes reminded Jake of occupied territories he had seen during his military training. Places where people were afraid to speak freely because they did not know who might be listening. Jake thought about his daughter Katie. She had been 11 when he left, full of energy and always asking questions about space and aliens. She had been proud that her father was chosen for the Royal Guard. She used to tell her friends that her dad was protecting important aliens and making humans look good in the galaxy. The transport ship began its descent toward Earth. Jake could see the blue and green planet growing larger in the window. Home looked the same from space, but Jake had a feeling that everything on the surface had changed. The pilot made an announcement about landing procedures. His voice was flat and professional, with none of the usual jokes or friendly comments that Earth pilots were known for. Even the pilot seemed different. Jake gathered his gear and prepared to disembark. As the transport touched down at New Chicago Spaceport, he noticed something else strange. There were alien ships on the landing pads, not the usual trade vessels or diplomatic shuttles, but military-looking craft with designs he did not recognize from his Royal Guard service. The customs process at the spaceport was more thorough than usual. Guards scanned Jake's identification multiple times and asked detailed questions about his Royal Guard service. They wanted to know which aliens he had protected and what planets he had visited. Their questions felt more like an interrogation than a welcome home interview. Finally cleared through customs, Jake hired a taxi to take him home. The driver was quiet and kept checking the rear-view mirror. The streets of New Chicago looked normal, but Jake noticed more security checkpoints than before, and some of the guards at those checkpoints were not human. Jake's heart started beating faster. Alien guards on Earth streets was not normal. The Royal Guard protected aliens on their worlds, not the other way around. Why would Earth need alien security forces? The taxi stopped outside Jake's house in the suburbs. The neighborhood looked peaceful and normal. Children played in yards and people worked in their gardens. But Jake's trained eye noticed details that others might miss. Windows had new security bars. Some houses had small alien communication devices on their roofs. And the people moved, carefully, like they were trying not to attract attention. Jake paid the taxi driver and walked up the path to his front door. He could see movement inside through the kitchen window. Lisa was home. Soon he would have answers to all his questions. Soon he would hold his daughter again and everything would make sense. But as Jake reached for the door handle, he had one last thought that made him pause. In 18 months of Royal Guard service, he had learned to read people and situations, and everything he had seen since returning to Earth told him that his family was in danger.